Which normal behavior habit of yours turned out to be a trauma response? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Worrying nearly every day if someone is mad at me or offended by me. This is cause I grew up with an ill-tempered parent. Answer. Why are you both sitting on the couch using your phones? Are you texting each other? Is it because you're not on talking terms? Mom is probably watching a video or on Facebook. No, why would we be texted each other, sister? Is probably texting a friend or on Instagram. But if we weren't on talking terms, we wouldn't even text. Mom, exactly me. Walks away. Story 2. Constantly apologizing for every little thing. If I'm extra anxious, I'll say it multiple times in a row. When someone tells me to stop saying sorry, I hit them with another I'm sorry. Answer. Something I've found that helped is turning I'm sorry into a thank you. At least the ones you have no reason to be sorry about. Sorry I'm late. Thank you for being patient. Sorry I had to shut myself in my room to calm down. Thank you for giving me space to recenter myself. It helps show that you appreciate them versus making it your fault when it's not. Story 3. Never asking for help. Like literally forgetting I could and should at times ask partners for help with things. I thought for a while I was just super independent. Story 4. Being super sweet. It's a fawning response so the other person doesn't hurt me or express unpredictable anger. Story 5. Always apologizing. Being scared to speak face to face. Immediately assuming I'm just going to be ignored. Thinking everyone secretly dislikes me. Daydreaming constantly. Detaching from myself others often. Answer. I can relate to the assuming you'll be ignored. I'm still sometimes surprised when a friend or colleague refers to something I said a while back. It's like I can't believe they were paying attention to me at all. And on top of that, they felt whatever I said was worth remembering. Even typing this out makes me sad. This thread is hitting too close to home. Haha. Story 6. Asking for permission for absolutely everything. Even if it's to take a lunch break at work or grab a snack from my parents' house. Story 7. I was super defensive to any criticism from authority figures due to having a parent that constantly criticized me and told me I would amount to nothing. My favorite boss finally pointed it out to me in a kind way. I then decided to change my behavior, and since then I have improved so many of my relationships and my career. Story 8. Disassociating. My partner pointed out when we took my mother out dinner. I completely checked out of the dinner and didn't even realize it until my girlfriend explained that my eyes got glossy and I was shut down. My mother is an extreme helicopter parent. I never had privacy and basically grew up attached to her until I went to college. Now at 25, I have my driving license, a car, and figuring out my career not under the microscope of my mother. Story 9. I found it very difficult to cope with uncertainty. For example, in my relationships with people. Fear and uncertainty were part of my childhood. Now I'm not surprised that I developed OCD. Story 10. Not being able to accept compliments from anyone in case there's a punchline on the other side of it. Not being able to ask for help because I'm afraid of coming across as annoying or needing too much. Story 11. Constant imposter syndrome. Even things I rationally know am really good at, there's always a voice that says I'm really not good enough, and sooner or later someone will find out and then nobody will love me. Story 12. I'm told I have the patience of a saint-nup that's actually PTSD level fear of conflict. I won't get into what caused it. Story 13. Extreme startle response. I don't know why, but even if I know someone is supposed to be approaching, I jump and yelp like they are a hungry bear. I've been told this is due to past trauma. Answer. My husband has an exaggerated startle response and a trauma background. I wonder how I never put those two things together before. In case it helps, he and I have developed a system. If I am coming into a room where he is from a direction he can't see, I stop by the light switch and flash the lights on and off until he turns around and sees me, and then I finish approaching. Saves him a lot of jump scares. Story 14. Trust issues. It's more like actions made by others that impacted me in a way and or could impact me in the future in real life. To the point where I can't trust people's word and having to lie to people saying that everything is fine but really isn't. Had friends and even family members who did some messed up things towards me and then lied that they would never do it again. Story 15. Walking with extremely light footsteps. My father was a very volatile man growing up with drinking problems. He disliked us, me and my brother, being noisy around the house. Our floorboards were loud underfoot, so he developed ways of walking virtually silently. Answer: I learned to sneak because sometimes it was the only freedom I had. My mother was psychotic at times, bipolar 1, and wouldn't let me outside the house if it was raining or if the sun was past noon. She would insist it was getting dark out even though it was hours from sunset, or if I transgressed in some way. One time I failed to notice a bag of food we brought in from grocery shopping, and therefore it didn't get put away by me. Either my mother or siblings had placed it on a kitchen chair that got pushed in. It wasn't even 10 minutes later, and she flew out of the house after me into the yard, shrieking at me that the lunch meat was ruined and had to be thrown away. I was grounded inside for a week. Rationally, lunch meat has enough preservatives to be okay at room temperature for several hours. If it wasn't, people would die from the little sandwiches at catered lunches. Also, I wasn't the only one putting groceries away, but I was the one outside the house, so that made me a target. I think she didn't like being alone, so she would find things to punish us for, to force us to stay with her. I could get out my window at night and roam the woods and the roads so I could get some air and not be in the house for days, especially in the summer. I remember how much I loved the full moon because it was like daytime. Story 16. Anger issues. I do have a temper, I can admit that. I'll sit there getting more and more angry before finally speaking up to defend myself or others. But I don't actually have anger issues. I'm angry I'm being harmful behavior, verbally, mentally, physically, emotionally issues. Dissociation. I didn't know until a few years ago that regularly feeling like you are an entity piloting a body in a video game, or that you are in a game and nothing else is real, is a trauma response. Memory loss. Oh, it's just the ADHD, really bad ADHD. It's just ADHD. Haha, right? Answer: I have struggled with anger issues, and I'm getting a lot better at managing my tone and how I communicate with people after years of therapy. But I know when people call me confrontational and meanie, it's because years of being disregarded as too sensitive and emotional made me extremely defensive of my boundaries once I started identifying them. I'm working to express myself kindly, but right now I butt heads with people quite often because I'm firm in maintaining my boundaries. Story 17. Cutting people off at the first sign of anything? It's a double-edged sword, as sometimes it needs to be done, and not everyone has the ability. But other times I end up burning bridges in relationships for no reason other than my own abandonment issues. Answer: I had a friend in college who did this, and I never really understood the cause of it. There were people who I knew well because they were part of my social group, and they were legitimately awesome people. Fun to be around, kind, humble, lots of good qualities. They'd be considered her best friend, and they'd go everywhere together. Then out of left field, they're evil, despicable human beings who she had a moral obligation to cut off. She'd never give a reason other than she'd said something that was unforgivable, and I'm not getting into it. Let's just say she wasn't who I thought she was. She tried doing it to me once by fabricating some drama and really leaning in. I didn't take the bait, stayed calm, and publicly shut her down. A friend who was with me during the drama was like, Jesus, you were cold as ice. She ended up apologizing to me, and we stayed on amiable terms, though I distanced myself after that. The funny thing is, 15 years after that drama, we work in the same field, and I see her at professional conferences every once in a while. We talk and catch up, but it's all surface and no substance. Story 18. Repeating myself. It's something I never understood about myself and punished myself so much over. It was completely uncontrollable, and I just deemed it as a character flaw. Trauma OCD-based looping, it's an OCD intrusive thought. When I found this out, it was like I've been proven innocent in a crime scene I was falsely convicted for. And I found out how to manage it, and I mostly don't do it anymore. Honestly, my poor friends, LOL, years of a broken record. Answer: okay, this one is fascinating to me. I'll repeat the same point over and over if I'm saying something where I feel the need to justify myself. It can be as simple as why I'm having a shower at this time instead of that time. Not necessarily serious things. Though the more serious, the more I'll repeat. And I don't realize I've done it until afterwards, then I'm so embarrassed. I've only recently realized the possible cause, the justification thing, so I'm going to look into this some more. Thank you. Story 19. Protective mothering, even with other adults. Like my friend doesn't need protection from traffic. LOL, overreacting to small, stressful situations. Panicking and indecision. Story 20. Picking up changes in behavior. Turns out I'm not just empathetic and in tune with people. I am hyper-vigilant of how people respond to every single stimuli. I've created flowcharts in my mind to know if something is going to cause me issues. Why? Because my parents are addicts, and I needed to know what type of environment I was going to be in. From about 8 to 12, I had tons of people in and out of my house. Knowing how people change the environment was necessary to function. Never realized this was an extreme version of what everyone does until someone asked me about it. Didn't notice others weren't always doing this, nor did I notice how off-putting it was. Whoops! Story 21. In public places like restaurants, always sitting in a position where I can see entrances, being very good at reading people. No, it really doesn't surprise me. Your girlfriend tried to stab you with a corkscrew. I'm kind of surprised she didn't succeed. Extreme startle response. There are things that aren't as bad now that I've been in therapy for a while. Story 22. 1. I wake up multiple times a night. Figured maybe I just sleep like shoot. So I continued this for 10 more hours with a full solid night of sleep being rare. Turns out that my body was on high alert when I slept, because one of my parents would come in at 1 a.m. or some random time screaming, yelling, cussing at us, and calling us names if we didn't have one chore done perfectly all through childhood and teen years. I actually really struggle with dishes now. BC, it gives me anxiety. 2. Having a panic attack whenever any pets got sick. BC, I thought sick pet putting them down. When my cat got sick after I was married, I had a total meltdown, and my husband was like, we will just go get her some meds at the vet. Yeah, it turns out your parents putting your pets down over a minor inconvenience isn't normal. 3. Chewing so little and careful as not to make noise so my parents weren't set off by it, which always resulted in name-calling. Thought everyone chewed food like that. Asking my husband 100x a day if he's okay because he was either too quiet or let out a sigh. Yay, narcissistic parents. Answer, I relate to number 4. My husband does this thing where he takes a long, deep breath periodically, and for a long time I thought he was signaling anger or disgust at me. Nope, just breathing. Even now, 14 years later, I still just double-check and ask, just breathing? When he does it. It's never been anything but a big breath. Funny how long it takes to unwire your brain. Story 23. Helping. I am passionate about helping people wherever I can. My entire career is in a particular area of social work. I help people through difficult systems. I give them information. I do paperwork. In my personal life, I help strangers. I'll offer directions. I compliment freely. I offer advice to friends. I'll dog sit. I'll make you soup when you're sick. I volunteer a lot. Why? I learned quite early that I am not valued for just being me. I also knew I really wanted to help. I didn't put it together until I was much older. I legit care about people and love helping them. I work hard to be good at it, but I know that's why it's the path I chose really early on when I figured out why I wasn't an active choice for anyone. I'm only likable loved for what I can offer, and I better keep busy doing it. Because once I stop, everyone will know how annoying and unlikable I am. Answer, God same. All of my work history has been about helping. I love it, and I do get a little high when I can be of use. I'm mostly customer support for tech, and I do help off the clock like you. Being of value, but also being of use. My internal thinking is offering is better than it being taken from me. And I've had so much taken from me that I can't have that happen again. I just can't. So why not offer what I think people want, and you get people happy with you in return, so maybe they'll stop taking. Story 24. Maybe not same thing, but I was in a serious car accident, which I don't even remember. I was at work, finishing up my day, and then just woke up in hospital the next morning with a concussion, compound factor, leg broken ribs, etc. Afterwards, certain hospital shows made me physically tense up. Just freeze. First time was ER. My mom was like, what's wrong? That's how I know it's a realistic hospital scene. Also, Metallica's Enter Sandman quick flashes me to surgery. Story 25. Being anxious when someone raises their voice or argues with someone else. Apologizing constantly for very minor things. I also get really anxious when I hear intimacy noises. Story 26. I carry a ton of useful items in case I need something. Apparently, others just assume someone else might help them out. Like they'll just ask, does somebody have scissors? And someone will hand them scissors? But also that someone is me, and I'll be handing you whatever you need before you even ask for it. No one will love me if I'm not useful enough. Story 27. I struggled for many years to lose weight. When I figured out that I have an oral fixation, it made my weight loss efforts much easier. Now I know that I'm not hungry or even really wanting food. I just want something in my mouth. Story 28. I always come up with a plan for the worst. It just come to me naturally. That way I know whatever happens, I'll be prepared. Turns out that's called catastrophizing, and I'd never heard of that term before. Story 29. Trigger warning, but covering up, closing my legs and shrinking. I was assaulted, not violation, but assaulted. A lot of the people who have liked me were also creepy. Story 30. Aiming for perfect. I was never satisfied with knowing I did my best. Perfect was the goal and anything less was failure. I was always pushed to be perfect as a kid. Story 31. Extreme reactions to certain foods. The person who molested harmful behavior me for years was a manager of a produce department and always smelled like celery. I never realized why that smell made me sick to my stomach until my therapist asked me about triggers. I also can't eat things like soup unless I make them, or know what every single thing in them is, because he used to put live bugs and shoot my food as a prank, but then actually forced me to eat it. Story 32. If you imagine digging through dirt to find gold in a tourist spot where they plant lots of gold, that would be the equivalent of finding new trauma responses in my life. Main one would be vulnerability. This shows up in 1,000 different ways. Structure and reliability is a good one. Having relationships that are considered the closest people in your life, where you tell them what is safe, not what you actually feel like. Feeling numb like a lot. It is to the point where I feel my body physically and emotionally, mentally shut down when I feel vulnerable. Story 33. Not feeling pain. I never reacted to pain and I thought I was Superwoman. Then I began to heal from my trauma, physical harmful behavior and emotional harmful behavior, and I began to feel pain again. It was oddly satisfying despite the fact that I could no longer walk off most injuries. Story 34. Took me 30 years to realize that the way I literally sit there and lose the ability to speak to someone who is raising their voice at me is the freeze trauma response. I was verbally harmful behavior a lot growing up, and now I just can't properly respond to someone speaking loudly or angrily. Story 35. The wall that keeps others out. Doesn't everyone protect themselves by simply putting up walls to prevent other people from getting close to them? Had more than one boyfriend tell me I should let down my walls and let them in. Nope, not going to do it. Well, I finally did do it for one man, and we were together happily for about 25 years before his passing. But I am sure I won't do it again. Story 36. Not getting nice things for me with excuse like, this is too much money, or that's not for me, or getting them and then not using them and save them for later. Story 37. For a very long time, my first reaction was that of violence. Over the past 2 years, through a lot of self-work, I've been able to add previous seconds to my reaction time, enough so that my brain can decide if the violent action is warranted. 99 out of 100 times it is not. Answer: a lot of these comments sound like me, but this one I would resorted to violence a lot. But in the past few years, I've really gotten a lot better with it. I don't hit anything anymore, for the most part. There might be a time, very, very rarely now, I'll throw something out of anger, but I'm proud I've gotten a lot better with not letting my anger out so horribly anymore. Story 38. I never went on more than one date with anyone for years. Kept finding reasons why something felt wrong. I thought everyone else was either really lucky or had low standards. Forced myself to go on a second date eventually and almost had a panic attack. I'd been gifted PTSD from harmful behavior in high school and avoiding it. Story 39. I thought I was excellent at giving presentations in front of large crowds because I can mentally detach and continue to talk. Turns out it was dissociation. Story 40. I notice and retain details and can pull them out easily. It borders on a compulsion to always be useful and know the answer. I also dislike being touched and have a huge personal bubble. Most people notice it after meeting me once. Story 41. Being able to read people extremely well due to being abandoned by my dad in public since I was only 3 years old. I've been asked for my opinion on people during different occasions, job interviews, teacher meetings. Story 42. Shutting down, feeling numb when anyone expresses anger, trying to manage everyone's emotions constantly. Story 43. Maladaptive daydreaming. I can just go away in my head. It's just fun for me these days. But yeah, it came about from bad times. Story 44. Being self-reliant, avoiding ever being in anyone's way or inconveniencing anyone or letting anyone know I have any emotional needs. Story 45. Looking at the top comments on this post, making me realize that maybe I am very fudge up. Considering I got about 90 of this stuff going on for me. Story 46. Constantly second-guessing and double-checking everything and devoting my life to success status position because my folks beat me for bad grades, told me I was a dumbass, and would never amount to anything. Whole life has been trying to prove them wrong. Answer, as a result of someone who valued the things you listed more than anything. I saw how they felt when they had a financial hit, or if I didn't look a certain way in front of people they wanted to impress. It was destructive. I hope that is not the case for you. I completely understand having goals and priorities. I hope you have learned how to please yourself and not your parents. Best wishes. Story 47. Defending myself and always making myself seem like a person nobody can fudge with. It's tiring and you realize people are nice to you because they don't want to be on your bad side. It's okay to be soft. Story 48. Making as little noise as possible at all times. I walk quietly. I keep door handles twisted until after I've closed them so the latch doesn't make contact with the wall. I make sure that when I pee, the stream hits the porcelain, not the water. When I use the kitchen sink for any reason, I keep the water pressure low and aim it for that curved part so it slides down the inner wall with no noise. If I drop something and it makes a loud sound, my heart starts racing, and I almost panic. I had to walk on eggshells as a kid in a house so quiet you could hear someone typing on a keyboard through 2 closed doors and down the hall. Story 49. Unable or unwilling to ask for help. Emotionally sensitivity over dramatic mood swings. Trust issues lying. The last one I just learned that I do regularly to keep myself protected. It's more truth by omission than lying. But I don't want people worrying about me. I don't trust that they will be there for me anyways. So I don't share what I am going through, then I'm sad that I'm lonely and in a bad place. That's a circle. Story 50. Being overly obsessed with competence. Doing every task assigned in the shortest time with the most accuracy and taking even the smallest human error as a sign of not being good enough. These harsh standards only applied to me, of course, and not to others. Story 51. Never taking the last cookie, larger slice, etc. It was always given to my sister because I was fat and she was hard and spoiled. I won't take it now, not because I'm gracious, but because I feel I don't deserve it. Story 52. Hyper-independence, disordered eating, excoriation disorder. Mentally preparing to survive the aliens, the monsters, the zombies, or even just dad. He'll either be trying desperately to be invisible or so people-pleasingly charming that it's exhausting. Story 53. Kind of ability, I guess. So I can be pretty silent when moving and stuff when I want to, and I can usually hear footsteps and recognize who it is because of those in some places, like my home. Story 54. Trauma response? Keeping my kitchen stocked. I was getting ready to move, so we started eating down the pantry and freezer. My anxiety ratcheted up as everything emptied out. I had to fight recurring intrusive thoughts about leaving the house and buying more food. I couldn't figure out how to deal with it. Eventually, I packed an entire carry-on suitcase with food. Whenever I got nervous, I'd open the suitcase and look at the food. Suyin. If I'm going somewhere, I have a cache of food. If weather permits, there's non-perishable food in the glove box of my car. In the winter, I bring a protein bar or drink with me when running errands. When I go on vacation, I bring food with me. On road trips, I'll buy something at the gas station even if I don't plan to eat it. The food anxiety is the result of childhood food insecurity. It got way worse after prolonged GI issues made it difficult for me to find food that didn't make me sick. Even now that my GI stuff is being treated, I still get squirrely about food. My husband and I have divided the fridge in thirds. My shelf, his shelf, and the shared shelf. I can share food, but if someone took food from me, there's no doubt I would get violent. As dog people say, I'm food aggressive. Answer, darn, you just unlocked a habit of mine. I had to squirrel away food in my room when I'd lock myself in. Easier to stay locked away than deal with my mom. Now I always have snacks with me and my emotional support water bottle. I also get irrationally irritated when someone eats the last bit of food and didn't discuss it with me. Have no problems sharing food on plates though. Definitely not a Joey doesn't share food person. Story 55. How timely. Was talking to a coworker and my desk is blocked from the foyer by a half wall. When I am sitting, I can't see over it or who is walking by. My coworker was astonished that I knew who was passing by out of my line of sight, strictly by the sound of their footsteps walk. What I didn't tell him was that this was a self-preservation mechanism learned in childhood, to know who was coming and to prepare for what would happen. I figured that explanation would be a bit too dark and depressing, so I just smiled and shrugged and told him when it's just a lucky guess. Story 56. Saying sorry to everything, flinching at loud voices, saying I'm fine, unconsciously never letting my guard down even at home when I thought I was relaxing. Always straining my ears to hear the tiniest sound, being hyper-aware of everyone in the house and their mental mood, bottling emotions, masking, keeping an ear out for footprints. A lot can be said about the sound. 29 and just recently got diagnosed with PTSD last month. Story 57. A lot of my hobbies, reading, writing, drawing, role-playing, were actually forms of escapism. I fell out of love with most of my passions and couldn't figure out why until I talked to a therapist about it. Story 58. Quickly moving to fix even minor problems before other people realized anything was wrong. Seems convenient to get a jump on small issues, but it's because sometimes even a small inconvenience would ruin the entire day. Things like arranging the fridge pantry a certain way, or moving objects away from the edges of tables so they were less likely to fall over if bumped, etc. Story 59. Rejecting intimacy. Pulling away from people when they rely on me. Pushing them away if I'm starting to feel like I need them. Story 60. My boss was crying and upset because someone road raged and flashed his firearm at her on the highway. Everyone was all concerned and in shock, and I couldn't for the life of me understand why. At that point, I went, oh, this apathy is not right. I must have had 3 or 4 people, including family, point a gun at me. And by that point, I had already rehearsed tragic ends so many times and attempted with a firearm. Not to mention angry father road rage incidents that my boss's story just didn't sound like a problem. It almost felt normal. Story 61. Stress every day before work because of a harmful behavior boss with insane expectations and no provided resources. I have a decent job now and the management are at least legally caring. But I'm still stress puking most mornings, Edit added now. I left the jerk boss. Story 62. I deliberately make people not like me so as to deny them the opportunity of not liking me organically. Therapist says it's a response to being ostracized and bullied at school. Story 63. Well, it turns out that if you use withholding food, going to bed without any dinner, as a regular punishment for your small children, they can develop a pretty extreme emotional response, shame, anger, despair, self-hatred, to feeling very hungry. Now throw in sugar as the only consistent reward you give them, not hugs, praise, or affection, and you can have a pretty sturdy eating disorder up and running before they're 10 years old. Story 64. Chewing on things, I used to eat the erasers off of pencils. I had a full box of pencils. The erasers would be gone in a week. I also used to chew my sleeves, my toys, anything rubbery. Story 65. Not doing chores or trying to help people with them. As a kid, I would get yelled at for being slow or for doing something wrong, so I developed a fear of even trying. I moved in with my boyfriend now, who treats me like a normal person, so I'm actually functional now. Story 66. So learned very quickly that coming home while I'm in the bathroom with the fan or hairdryer on, or wearing headphones, or vacuuming is not the time to walk up on me and say hello. My parents didn't particularly believe in knocking, or that something could wait until I was finished with whatever I was doing, especially with the hairdryer, man. Like my head's flipped over, my neck's exposed, I'm vulnerable. Just wait a few goddamn minutes. Story 67. Not caring about what I wanted, only accommodating to others' wants. I only realized I did that when I started dating my boyfriend, and he would ask me what I wanted for dinner. I never had an answer. Story 68. Becoming completely emotionally cold in moments of extremely high stress. I don't know how to explain it better than going into a kind of extremely efficient robot mode, getting shoot done, which sounds okay, but it comes with complete cold rationality towards people I love who are in the precarious situation. My emotions get completely shut down. Story 69. When I was very young, growing up, I would tell these outlandish stories to people in school, at clubs, wherever. Just weird shoot I made up. I never thought twice of it and found it amusing. Then I began doing it in my relationships. Lying, more stories, really long, and lifetime for women type themes of craziness. I have since concluded after therapy, this is due to trauma and harmful behavior, and my way of controlling a relationship and making sure I keep people where I want them, place them where I need them. Interesting to find that out and have it make sense after years of doing this. Story 70. Having to cover my ears to be able to sleep. Something I have to do to this day. It's not protection from the TV sounds. My parents were both sick and dying, but my mom earlier than my dad. At night, she would scream in pain very loudly. She had severe gout, among other issues. After I'd done as much as I could for her and she'd tell me to go to bed, I'd cover up my ears to feel safe. I was always afraid I'd find them dead, even as a little kid. If I could block the sound of her screams, I could feel safe and pretend I was any normal kid going to bed for school the next day. Except for when my dad's cancer would bleed, and after cleaning it up, I'd have nightmares about blood all night. My mom had one of her own. She couldn't sleep during nights that felt too cold. My grandfather was often tipsy and violent when she was little, 1940s. One night when she was 9, my grandmother woke her, telling her to grab the other kids and run hide in the woods. She could hear her father screaming he was going to eliminate everyone. She described being in her long nightgown, barefoot, with her infant brother in her arms, dodging bullets flying past her head and hitting the trees. She took her little siblings and hid in the corn crib for 3 days. My grandmother brought food and warmth when she could manage to slip out. It was so cold outside. She disliked the cold and disliked the sounds of bullets. They lived in very rural Alabama with no way to call for protection, even if there had been any. Story 71. Having intimacy shortly after meeting someone or as an icebreaker. I have nothing against hookups, but for me, it was definitely a trauma response. Story 72. I learned in my early 20s that shutting down when someone starts yelling at me is indeed not normal. I laughed when explaining this to my then boyfriend, and I'll never forget the look on his face and his response. Story 73. I have a very rigid way of problem solving within relationships. Instead of listening openly with empathy, I immediately start to calculate my response to minimize the conflict, regardless of whether or not it takes care of how myself or the other person is feeling. They are feeling X, so I should respond with Y to have this be over as soon as possible. Story 74. Suppressing the movements my body naturally wants to make when excited about something. For context, I am autistic, diagnosed at 32IO, 35IO now, and have been able to successfully suppress my stims since childhood due to the bullying I got. Since I didn't know I was autistic back then, the only logical thing to do when certain actions cause you to be bullied is suppress them. But nowadays, it's impossible for me to stime without feeling extremely vulnerable and self-conscious about it. I am scared to passing that people will reject me, again for dancing around in my chair when I'm happy or excited, so I still cannot bring myself to do so. For years, I thought this suppressing was normal, and that I grew out of my weird movements. Turns out that was wrong. Story 75. Hypervigilance, perfectionism, and the constant feeling of not being good at anything comes from growing up in a physically, emotionally, and mentally harmful behavior family. Also, the fact that things most people would find traumatic, I shrug off and continue about my day. But tiny little annoyances, inconveniences will make me want to scream. Have to call 911 at work and use every fire extinguisher in the building? Okay, that's done. Next thing. Have the computer freeze up when I'm trying to do something? OMG, FML, I want to throw this thing out the window. Just get me out of here now. Story 76. The ones I know I have are apologizing for everything, distrust of people, doing everything on my own, even if I really do need help. And if I feel legitimately threatened or afraid, both my arms will go numb, so it makes it difficult to do much with them. Story 77. I grew up with what I recently found out is likely a malignant narcissist and his enabler. It seems most everything I do is a trauma response. I read an article about the lost child a few months ago, and it was like my biography. I also was a scapegoat along with my brother and mother. I'm terrified of most people I meet for the first time in case they are like him and hiding it. I never really achieved much in life, but I did manage to flee the country. I went no contact with my parents around Christmas last year and am trying to cope with symptoms of PTSD. Story 78. In my case, indifference towards romance. I have a lot of problems growing up, but recently I noticed that I couldn't care less about getting into a relationship with someone. I've had a few partners, 2 of them I've dated exclusively, been engaged once, but they never work out. I've learned that I have a very hard time building intimacy with someone, and even if I do love them back, I would start doubting them, which makes me self-sabotage my own relationship. It took me a long time to realize that my behavior comes from my parents. Growing up, they often argued. It got so bad that my father would leave the house for weeks, while my mother would start cussing on the children instead, taking it out on them. It happens on a regular basis. Part of me just doesn't want to end up in a relationship that will make me unhappy. And part of me just doesn't care enough to even try. Story 79. Cleaning and keeping my space tidy in general. So many of my friends joke around asking how my apartment is so clean all the time, and I'll just say trauma. I grew up in a house with 10 people, about 40 cats, 7 birds, 3 dogs, etc. at any given time, and it was my and my older sister's job to clean up after all of them. I had worms, fleas, ringworm, and probably lots of other exciting parasites. Basically, my house was the one no one let their kids visit. I also have a huge problem with authority figures. I'm a notorious people pleaser, and I stay eerily calm faced with violence from other humans. Story 80. Being able to predict outcomes. Apparently, it's pattern recognition from traumatic events of something lends me almost a sixth sense when it comes to dangerous situations and people. Story 81. Anxious attachment that gets triggered the moment I sense that my title in the relationship is no longer safe. I always assumed you should do everything you can if a person tries to leave, to show them that, look, this is how much I love you. I'm fighting and asking you not to go. Nope, just trauma from child neglect and narc parents. Story 82. Lying effortlessly can differentiate between people's footsteps. Basically detect whose footsteps are coming to my room. Incredible hearing. Answer. Because able to lie convincingly and effortlessly is an ability I try very hard not to utilize. It's far harder to remember the lie than it is to create it and sell it. It's something I tell my kids. It's far easier to just own your shoot than to have the possibility of the consequences coming back around to bite you later. It's also easier than weaving a web of lies and trying to remember them all. Only lie if you must, and then lie well. Story 83. Being desperate for friends and accepting whatever shoot came my way. Feeling tragic and having mental breakdowns every time I was on my period. Thinking everyone was angry, cruel, manipulative, wanted to hurt you, and only had bad intentions. Story 84. Worrying that the second someone I loved was out of sight, they would die and I would never see them again. Story 85. Cannot sleep in public, on a plane for instance, and must have the door to my bedroom closed and locked. You can figure that one out. Story 86. Oh boy, I have a few. 1. Not being able to accept compliments. 2. Hyper helpful to others, but can't do things for myself and have so much guilt when I do something only for me. 3. Very self-deprecating dark humor. Hyper vigilant on moods and what's going on. Say sorry constantly. For everything, even if I had nothing to do with it. 6. Try to make myself much less visible when out in the world, or conversely, having to be the biggest personality in the room. Downplay anything positive I do say have happened to me. 8. Inability to emotionally regulate without shutting down. I thought it was normal to be apathetic or only have extreme moods, not stable moods. 8. Hypervigilant on exits and needing to have an exit route planned. 9. Having to overplan everything and have extreme anxiety when doing something I haven't planned or is unexpected. Having an amazing ability to handle all the worst crap happen with little to no adverse reactionary moods until I'm alone. 11. Sundown 10. Have a really tough time breaking down or being vulnerable to anyone else. 12. Have very few friendships, relationships that are meaningful. Change my personality based on who I'm with. Downplay any negative event that happens to me because it's not that bad, others have it worse. 15. Will put others' wants needs before myself every single time and have so much trouble wanting doing things for myself. 16. Maladaptive dreaming. 17. Can't ask for help. It's almost physically painful to do so. Now that I'm writing them out, there's more than I thought, LOL. And I'm sure there's more. These are just off the top of my head. Story 87. Anytime somebody is audibly angry, raising their voice even slightly, my body goes into flight mode. I thought for the longest time it was because I just generally didn't like loud noises, and then my therapist figured it out. Story 88. Using emojis in practically all my texts. My first boss was an absolute roller coaster of a woman, and she would often accuse me of having attitude over text. So to this day, I catch myself putting in emojis to make sure my message is not taken the wrong way. Story 89. Having a natural knack for understanding psychology turned out to be less natural and more my mom using me as her therapist. Story 90. Being self-effacing, apologizing for anything and everything and nothing, worrying myself sick over disappointing others when I can't do exactly what I think they expect of me, not asking for what I want, feeling constantly attacked, potentially attacked, and therefore being highly avoidant and even moody and passive-aggressive at times. Hating myself. Well, are these normal things? Either way, I'm working on it. Going no contact with harmful behavior parents is one of the best and hardest things I've ever done. Oh, also terrible short-term and long-term memory and constant jumpiness at every unexpected sound or sight, even my own shadow. Story 91. Hyper-independence. I can do anything myself because my family always dropped the ball. Combine that with a crippling fear of failure and low self-efficacy, and you get a type A workaholic. At work, I consistently overwork myself and take on too much. When people see that if they don't do something, I will just do it for them. My managers just love it. And within 1-2 years at a job, I'm completely burned out from taking on 3 people's jobs. Story 92. I overanalyze everything. I think through every possible scenario I can to try and pick the one with the best outcome. But it leads to extreme anxiety and choice paralysis. Why do I do this? Because every time something bad happened to me or people I cared about when I was younger, my parents scolded me and told me it was my fault because I obviously hadn't thought things through. So now I think everything through, but I'm still scared I'll make the wrong choice. If something goes wrong or not how I planned it to, I panic and blame myself. I should have thought about everything, so it's my fault I made the wrong choice. It doesn't matter if the situation is completely out of my control. I should have made a better choice so that it would be under my control. This has been a fun one to unpack with a therapist. Story 93. I have found my people. Sending all of you love and hugs. You are special and deserve peace and all the love in the world. Story 94. Feeling not good enough, like I'm losing them? Anger responds to being made to feel sad or embarrassed. Story 95. Tensing my face to stop my facial tic. It really hurts to stop the tic, but I was yelled at and punished for making a shoot-smelling face as a teenager. Story 96. Not knowing how to differentiate who I was from what happened to me. Turns out that's not a normal form of someone questioning their own identity. Luckily, I don't struggle with that anymore. Also, always second-guessing myself and my intuition. I used to gaslight the fudge out of myself. Story 97. Hypervigilance, panic hearing raised male voices, especially angry ones, even if they are not directed at me. An absolutely batshit insane freakout response beyond reason if I ever encounter a cockroach. Story 98. My terrible hatred of Sundays. I felt like a trapped big cat, lashing out at anyone that came near or put up the slightest obstacle. Therapy reminded me that Sundays were tipsy days for my alcoholic mom and dad. They would get tipsy, fight, yell, and scream, then drink some more. Toss in my own anxiety, now medically controlled, and things get wild. I thought everyone felt that way on Sundays. Not until therapy and Vipassana meditation did I realize everything that was wrapped up in that day for me. I more or less fixed it, but not until my own kids were almost adults. I have been working to make sure they aren't wrapped up in the same bullshit. Well, see, Story 99. Am not a night owl. I have hypervigilance at night and don't feel safe sleeping until I see the sun start to rise because nighttime was a very unsafe time at home, and I had to be on high alert always. Story 100. Ruminating. It wasn't until I went to group therapy that I learned some people don't ruminate, they storytell or project. Story 101. I had the basic one, which is forcing yourself to act mature for your age, trick yourself into feeling like an adult. My trauma happened right when I turned 13, so that was not fun. I also get time mixed up. Like my birthday is in March, but since my three-quarters birthday is in December, I usually already feel the age I'm going to be next by December. Also, when my dog died, it felt like it happened way too quickly. Even though he was alive for 12 years, so I had a lot of time with my dog, it just feels like a fever dream when that day actually happens. Story 102. Always having to be hyper aware of my surroundings and can't truly relax. About 4 years ago, my doctor told me to sit for 5 minutes and do nothing. No TV, no phones, no music, no book, just nothing. The thought of that was awful. I went out to my car and sobbed. That's when we realized I had crippling anxiety and panic disorders. Story 103. I have no problem helping people. I don't know how to ask for help for myself. I grew up being my mom's caretaker, and whenever I had issues, I was either being dramatic or told to deal with it. I had to beg to go to the dentist in 7th grade because my tooth hurt so bad, and my face swelled up and felt hot to the touch. They had to drain a pretty bad abscess. My mom should have clued the fudge in when the kid with a dentist phobia asked to go to the dentist. Story 104. My father would always get mad and beat us so bad at the most trivial of things, especially lights being turned on around the house. Today, I have always been afraid of turning on the lights, even if it is absolutely needed, and practically forced myself to get used to moving around in the dark, causing several accidents. I figured it might be much better to fall down the stairs because I could not see a thing than face his wrath. Also, biting the insides of my cheeks, which resulted in permanent scarring. Story 105. Piling furniture and boxes against my door before going to sleep. I lived with a lot of kids who did it while growing up. Story 106. Asking what's wrong when I actually mean, hey, what's up? Or do you need anything? Stressing over holiday birthday gifts for my kids because one was receiving a bit more than the other. Not crying or being emotional. Turns out only crying at funerals is odd. Story 107. Not speaking up when I need to. I've watched more people make mistakes and mess up, all because I was afraid I would get yelled at for correcting them. Story 108. IDK, if you'd call it normal, but I always sleeping with blankets no matter the temperature. Looking back, it was a way to stop anyone from touching me, which was dumb because my perpetrator would just move them out of the way. But as a kid, you kind of just did what you could no matter how fruitless. I'm still almost always with my blankets if I'm not up and around because it still makes me feel safe and maybe someone might not hurt me again, no matter how silly that sounds. Story 109. Turning the doorknob before opening and closing the door so it doesn't make a sound, as well as walking toes first, not to make a sound. God forbid I woke up my mother. She's not around anymore, and I still do it. Oh, and freaking and crying out after breaking a dish. Breaking a glass or dish might as well have been a sin in my old house. Story 110. I found out it's not normal to live in ghost mode as much as possible so nobody can easily track my physical location or gain more information about where I work or hang out at regularly and with who. Anything that could possibly be used to find me quickie without my knowledge. I try to blend in and retain control of my ability to exit any potential dangerous situations as much as possible. I refuse to live anywhere I could be easily assessed in the event of an intruder. I thought everyone did this. Turns out this is pretty common for survivors of aggressive stalking. Story 111. Today I learned something. When I was younger, my father and mom were going through a divorce. Both used adult beverage as a coping mechanism. My father moved out and we lived with our mom. Since she was tipsy a lot, I practically raised my two siblings. My mom has now gotten remarried. Married, and we've moved into a new house. My mom told my siblings to get the glasses off of the table. They didn't listen. She said it multiple times. She was preoccupied, so she didn't really get mad. Yet they still didn't do it. I then said, do what she said. And they instantly ran to do it, fighting over who would get the most glasses. I learned today I am more of a mother figure to my siblings than my mom is to them. Story 112. I have anxiety issues. This often leads me to disassociate with what's going on around me. I basically spent the first 5 years of my life listening to my mother and father scream and beat the shoot out of each other. Story 113. Enjoying solitude and seeing it as an inconvenience bother when anyone wants to be with me. Hypervigilance, having the ability to take accurate cues of body language from people, no matter how subtle it is. Imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter if you've been told literally by everyone you're very talented at something. Every time you indulge in that talent, you feel like a nobody with a mediocre ability to make it seem like you're good at something you're horrible in. Tell me I'm the best to ever do it, and I'll just think you're being nice and shying away from the discomfort of letting me know I really suck and need to find a better hobby. Being hyper-observant of everything, mood, tone, body shifts, eye coordination, everything. Overthinking every situation, every interaction, every encounter. Anything that happens, you have to think of any kind of negative outline that keeps convincing you how bad or awkward you were during an interaction and how the other person must be thinking about how weird you are. Inability to maintain eye contact. I can speak to someone standing in front of me whilst my eyes are fixated on everything but their face. Looking straight in someone's eyes just feels uncomfortable. Anxiety, fearing commitment and affection, yet still crave the feelings from it. So what ends up happening is you pursue, get someone to like you, create memories, then without a doubt you just drop them because now the affection is getting intense and you don't know how to handle it, so you need to get away from them to feel safer. So now it's just a consistent cycle of push and pull, because even though you dislike affection, it still makes you feel alive. Feeling anxious when conflict surfaces, being fearful of a sound of a woman in pain, the ability to memorize footsteps of everyone in the house, feeling the obligation of sparing some food on the plate for the next day because you don't know if you'll have anything to eat the following day despite not being full. Hyper, independence. Doesn't matter if I'm not the verge of dying. Asking for help is not an option for me because I feel like I bother people when I do, so I do everything on my own. Always feeling like a nuisance, so you try by all means to compensate that feeling by trying by all means not to be an inconvenience to people. Sometimes that surfaces as people-pleasing behavior. There's a lot more, but this list is long enough already. Story 114. I was always really clingy to my mom and used to have nightmares every single night about losing her. When I was really little, she was hit by a minivan and nobody told me she was alive until the next day. I guess I repressed it because one day I just started telling the story to my therapist and kept remembering more and more details about that night. I knew that was probably where my fear of cars came from, but I never even considered myself overly protective of my mom. Story 115. Noise-canceling headphones when in shopping centers or on walks. Found out recently I'm likely neurodivergent, which explains a lot. Story 116. I have to do the simplest tasks with much more out of me and energy due to my father's high standards on me. Story 117. Knowing the footsteps of everyone in my house, it creeps my partner out that I know he's coming from 10 feet away without being able to see him. I always thought it was just a weird talent, a shoot superpower type of thing. Turns out it's a hypervigilance response to having an angry, harmful behavior father and an older brother who basically live to torment you. Story 118. Constantly tapping the tip of my thumb to the tips of my other fingers. I have been doing this since I was a little child. I had no idea it was a trauma response anxiety tic until I saw a TikTok on it a year or two ago. Still baffles me sometimes. Story 119. Saying sorry all the time, even when I do nothing wrong at all. Sometimes I say sorry when nobody is there. Story 120. Saying sorry to everyone. I literally apologized to my surgeon I had in 21 for my surgery, taking not the 2.5 hours it was supposed to. It ended up being closer to 6. Story 121. Hyper-independence and crippling abandonment issues, fear of failure. I don't ask for help at work until I'm at my breaking point, and I've stressed and made myself sick with anxiety, so then I'm obviously going to get fired, and then I'll be homeless, and all my friends will see I'm worthless and leave me out on D. I had to get the nerve to speak up to my boss about this. It was difficult as hell, but I had to say I am currently doing therapy for my trauma, and one of my trauma responses is struggling to ask for help due to severe reactions. While I trust you when you say you won't fire me for approaching you with a question, I still struggle too. Can we do a one-on-one meeting more often and for less time? I have now 10-minute one-on-one meetings once a week instead of 30-minute ones once a month. It gives me that time to approach a question and feel like I'm not wasting her time. It has gotten even better recently, and I've been able to send her a Teams message and give a quick call. I struggle with having to defend my answers when they don't need to be defended, and this time limit in small meeting had helped tons. I am so thankful for the boss I work for and her being able to be a bit more flexible with me. I'm 28 and I struggle to feel like I'm not a bother to her, but she has never done anything to actually make me feel like that. It's just in my brain. Story 122. Always being surprised when people I met before said they remembered me from when we'd met before. I'm an identical twin, and we were always referred to as the twins growing up, as opposed to just being recognized as individual people. I always thought I was just lost in the pair. Now I find it hard to accept that I myself might be memorable. Story 123. Double-checking my stovetop knobs are all turned off before I leave the house. Unplugging my toaster I just used before leaving. Feeling concerned if a light is flickering oddly. Immediately having to scan my whole apartment if I think I smell smoke. Double-checking that the candle I just blew out is actually out and didn't leave a burning ash somewhere. So many more, and it all comes down to realizing how much I'm subconsciously concerned about my house burning down because it did when I was 15. Like realizing that people who haven't gone through it probably aren't so concerned about it, but it's always on my mind whether I realize it fully or not. Fully. Or, Story 124. I try to feel other people's emotions for them. It's like I think that if I feel sad or angry too, then they won't have to feel it as strongly. I'm 44 years old and still believe that others' emotions are either my fault or my responsibility. I feel intensely worried when someone won't tell me what's bothering them. If they say they don't want to talk about it, I ping-pong back and forth between I must have done something wrong and they're mad at me, and they can't trust me, so I've failed them. Story 125. Intense, dark humor in response to everything I don't like. My psych told me, but it laughs when I do it, which is amazing, ha ha ha. Story 126. Often feelings of pure worthlessness, especially when my life is like it is now. Very poor kids feel no self-worth. The other kids at school let them know it, and you learn that people automatically judge you and find you disgusting when you're poor. Story 127. Trying to people please and avoiding all conflict. My parents were big believers in corporal punishment, rural Australia, and the fact my dad consistently crushed my curious nature and beat me. I just can't get close to people. I always end up pushing them away and always walk like I'm on eggshells as he always flipped out every day over the smallest things. So now I do anything to avoid conflict and try to please everyone, but I just never can do both. I just end up depressed by the end of the day. This is why I struggle with unfamiliar situations. I just can't bring myself to ask for help for fear of retribution. Both my parents are always micromanaging my career. Even though I prefer a more laid-back lifestyle, I'll still put the hours in without complaint, thinking of GTFO up north away from them. Story 128. I cannot trust anyone or talk about myself in any way. I turned out to be an utter failure when it comes to attracting anyone because of all the bullying and harassment everyone around me from 3 to 12 gave me during my life. Even after school when I was 25, I had teenagers from the high school bully me. Rarely ever physically, but people most of my life have said the worst things imaginable and made fun of every possible aspect of my life or interest in life to the point to where anytime anyone asked me even simple questions about things, my mind immediately races to them, bullying me like everyone else did. Kids would do that smile teenage girls have on their faces when they fake really super big, wide open mouth smiles every time I ever tried to express myself, talk about anything, or even ask questions. If it wasn't that it was someone who would scream at the top of their lungs at me in junior high, I remembered at STFU when I would on a rare occasion try saying something in class like a question to the teacher. So for me, normal is not talking to anyone and not answering personal questions to the best I can. If I socialize with no one, live alone and die alone someday, and I won't bother anyone this way, and it's just normal for me. Worst thing of all is retrospectively, I think I met a few girls in my life who might had not been trying to bully me, and they actually were interested in me, but I instinctively pushed them all away because every other girl who ever smiled at me was faking it so they could do mean and horrible things to me. Like this one chick who told all the girls in school I violation her, which wasn't even remotely true, and even at nighttime when I thought I was safe, she would go out of her way to call a bunch of other girls over to her on like her phone or something, and I would have 20 people from school harassing me when all I wanted was to walk to the store to buy a soda. I think eventually all of them, except that one girl, figured out that I was completely harmless, since they all left me alone after not too long, and my pathologically lying friend at the time might have been telling the truth when her fat friend, who was with her during the beginning of all of when it started, apparently told her to stop fudge with me, but all that left a scar on me that makes it totally normal behavior for me to never trust anyone, especially females. And since I am not gay, those girls and everyone else who hurt me forced my brain to rewire itself to make me asexual. Story 129. I have always had an incredibly hard time with intimacy and vulnerability. I don't like getting close to people, nor do I like physical touch. I'm very independent and introverted, to the point where I don't need anyone other than myself. Turns out, I am an avoidant. Check out attachment theory if you don't know that is, and I believe it stems from that. Story 130. I recently had spine surgery. Someone has to pick you up at discharge. One of my oldest friends drove an hour plus to pick me up. I was like, just drop me off at home. I am good. She was like, no. She took me to her place. I was like, I only need 2 days and then I will go home. Again, she said no. Rinse and repeat for 1 week. Her husband told me I would get sick of them before they got sick of me. 50 plus years old, and it made me nervous to have someone take care of me. Story 131. Preferring to be alone or quickly running away from anyone I talk to. I'm afraid my words might hurt them, or they would judge me negatively. I thought it was an introvert move, but there's a stem of it. My whole classroom in 6th grade was full of bullies. Nearly everyone there bullied me, and it was so hard to properly talk to any of them without being a victim. I was quite social before 6th grade, had good number of friends, but starting that, it's even hard to ask my teacher for help regarding lessons. Story 132. Apologizing. Always sitting with my back to a wall, hiding a get away from here stack of 75, keeping my pockets empty all the time, avoiding crowds, people pleasing. Someone starts yelling at me, I just concede their point and do whatever I can to get them to stop. Taking more food than I can eat. Doesn't help that 10 years later, people still get mad and annoyed at me over food low. Story 133. My inability to sympathize with, empathize with, or give even the fraction of a fudge about anyone who isn't in my care. Makes me great at my job and fudge awful as a human. Story 134. Not my behavior, but my acceptance of others' behavior. I just learned that screaming at kids and other people is generally considered heinous and not just a difference in temperament. Story 135. My inability to be alone for long periods of time. For a while at ages 10-19, for the most part, I lived with my dad. He worked second shift, so I'd see him for maybe 10-15 minutes after school, then be alone all day. I had no friends until I was about 16. I was so lonely constantly. My dad was doing his best to provide for me, but then there are periods of time where I need to be left alone for a couple of hours as well because I'm used to being alone and having that. But longer than that, I start to panic and get upset. I start to feel like I don't matter to anyone anymore, and I get severely depressed and go into a spiral until someone comes, and then I feel like I'm almost manic with how much I start talking to them and how excited I am. Story 136. Hiding things in the trash instead of just throwing them away normally. I didn't want to hear my parents' unwanted questions or comments. Story 137. Flinching and cringing when people yell at or around me. Turns out it's a lot more than just the volume that gets to me. Story 138. Never ever asking for help until I broke down begging for help. I always thought I was strong in handling things until I very clearly wasn't. Story 139. Mistakes I make are unforgivable no matter how small, and I assume that people will leave me if I don't appease them or if I make them upset. Story 140. Immediately apologizing and defending myself for anything. I learned that normal people usually don't do that. Story 141. There's quite a few TBH. Severe trust issues seems to be the hub of most of them, though. I will never rely on another person for help mentally or physically or emotionally. I get extremely defensive when corrected, while simultaneously never being 100 sure on what I'm doing. Trust me, it's just as confusing as it sounds. And constantly watching micro expressions to see who is feeling what and when they might switch up. For the longest time, I thought I was just more aware and had bad luck with friends. Turns out getting stabbed in the back by every single person in your life at some point or another causes some pretty bad trust issues going forward. Story 142. Looking at rentals I can afford on a single income in my kid's school district. Because even though I love my girlfriend of 6 years, I lost the ability to trust anyone 110 after my ex cheated on me with multiple men and gaslit me about it. Story 143. I would do emotional monitoring. I would also immediately apologize if I thought I had done something wrong to ward off others' anger. Story 144. Pushing people away to avoid getting close to them, but then when they get closer, being so scared to lose them. Seeking validation from guys. Story 145. Being unable to be around people arguing or yelling. I get so anxious and overwhelmed, I can't even be within earshot. Like if I'm at the store and a lady is yelling at her kids, or if a couple is outside arguing, I can't be around it, I have to leave immediately. I've left full carts of groceries in the store and walked out. I remember just a couple months ago I was at the mall and really wanted to buy this jacket. The line was kind of long and there was a mom and her daughter was fussy and bored. The little girl started crying and whining and the mom started yelling at her and I had to put the jacket down and leave. I still think of that jacket. Edit, my husband is the best person I've ever met. When we were dating, one of these instances happened. I filled up a grocery cart with items, but I had to ditch it in the freezer section due to a couple arguing and yelling. I remember going to my car and crying because I really needed the groceries. I called my husband, boyfriend at the time, and revealed what I was struggling with. I squeaked out as best explanation as I could. Y'all, this man drove down to the store, got my cart, and got all the groceries for me, paid, and loaded them into my car. I did not have to go back in. Story 146. I buy certain treat foods despite knowing I won't actually enjoy them. My mother would buy her favorites and no one was allowed them but her. So now I find myself buying things like Oreos, gummy bears, mint chip ice cream. I'll have a bite or two. Yup, don't like that, and throw it away. It's like I have to prove to myself that I can eat them even if I don't want to. Story 147. Learning others' behavior patterns and learning how to predict their responses, then changing behavior accordingly. Learn from having a family that yelled at me a ton whenever I did anything they didn't like. Now I flinch a lot and can't speak when someone is yelling, "Woo!" Story 148. Having a wave of anxiety hit me whenever someone raises their voice. Another one is having a hard time asking for help or seeking advice from someone in fear they'll get upset with me. Story 149. Being perpetually late to social engagements. Dressing to blend in. Never touching other people's stuff without permission. Endless self-deprecating jokes. Story 150. Unable to be open with feelings I have that may impact someone else to the point of never airing issues in relationships for years until one day I explode. People-pleasing is horrendous for yourself and unfair to those around you. I still haven't worked it through. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vancher. See you soon.